No one in Providence ever imagined they would witness something like this. A courtroom, usually quiet, usually respectful, usually a place where justice stands taller than ego, would become the scene of something so shocking, so outrageous, that people would talk about it for years. Reporters would replay the footage again and again. Clips would go viral online. Even officers who had served 30 years would whisper, "I've never seen anything like that in my entire career." Because on this morning, in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, the man accused wasn't a criminal from the streets. He wasn't a drunk driver. He wasn't a reckless teenager. He wasn't a thief, a troublemaker, or a petty thug. He was the son of the most powerful law enforcement figure in the entire city, Ethan Morrill, the only child of Police Chief Raymond Morrill. And everyone knew his reputation: arrogant, untouchable, spoiled by privilege, protected by his father's badge. For years, Ethan walked around like the city belonged to him, traffic violations dismissed, complaints lost in paperwork, assault allegations that mysteriously never had evidence. People whispered, "It's the chief's son, just leave him alone." But this time, he crossed a line even his father couldn't erase. This time, Ethan didn't just insult someone. He physically assaulted a judge. Not just any judge. Not a rookie. Not a temporary appointment. He assaulted Judge Frank Caprio, a man older than him by 5 decades, a man respected nationwide, a man known for compassion, fairness, and absolute professionalism. When the story broke, reporters flooded the courthouse. What did he do? What will happen to him? Will the chief protect him again? But everyone asked the same question. How will Judge Caprio respond? Because the world had seen the judge handle disrespect before: sarcastic teens, angry parents, rude motorists, but never something like this. Never violence. Never from a police chief's son. And what happened inside that courtroom left the entire city speechless. But to understand how it reached that point, you must first know what happened before the cameras turned on, before the officers escorted Ethan in, before the nation watched the chief walk into a courtroom where his badge no longer held any power. This story begins 2 nights earlier, with a celebration that spiraled into destruction. 2 nights before the chaos in Judge Caprio's courtroom, the city of Providence was alive. Lights glittered over the river. Bars were packed. Music thumped from every rooftop lounge. And in the middle of it all, occupying the VIP section of the most expensive bar in the city, was Ethan Morrill, the police chief's son. He wasn't just partying, he was performing. Shots lined up on the table, bottles popped. Friends cheered him on. Girls recorded videos for their pages. Ethan loved this. Not the alcohol, the attention. The sense that everyone in the room bowed to him without him saying a word. Because they all knew who he was. If he got in trouble, he'd walk away. If he cursed out an officer, the officer would apologize. If he crashed a car, the report would vanish. For Ethan, the world didn't have consequences. It only had opportunities. His best friend Mason leaned in and said, "Yo, Ethan, check this out. 3 girls asked what your last name is. They want to meet you." Ethan smirked. "I don't even need to tell them, they already know." The night grew louder. Crowds spilled into the street. Cars blared their horns as revelers stumbled across sidewalks. Around 1:40 a.m., Ethan, already drunk and fuming with arrogance, left the club. His friends followed. He wasn't supposed to drive. Everyone told him not to, but Ethan waved them off. "My dad's the chief," he said, jingling his keys. "Relax." He got behind the wheel, engine roaring, music shaking the windows. He tore down South Main Street like it was a racetrack. Several people called 911. A mother walking her dog had to jump out of the road. Even a parked patrol car flashed its lights at him. Ethan didn't slow down. He accelerated. But fate had already set the stage. 2 blocks ahead, a white sedan paused at a stop sign. Inside was a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher named Marilyn Cole, heading home from visiting her sister. She looked left, looked right, pulled forward, and Ethan's SUV slammed into the side of her car so violently that the airbags exploded. Her vehicle spun, crashed into a hydrant, and stopped inches from a streetlight pole. Ethan's SUV skidded, scraping the pavement before jolting to a stop. Witnesses screamed. Phones came out. People ran toward the wreck. But Ethan wasn't concerned about the injured woman. He cared about something else. The cameras. The attention. The consequences he thought he could dodge. Within minutes, flashing red-blue lights filled the block. Officers rushed to the scene. And that's when everything began spiraling even further. An officer approached Ethan. "Sir, are you injured? Sit down," Ethan shoved him. "Don't touch me. Do you know who I am?" The bodycam captured his exact words. Another officer tried to detain him, but Ethan raised his fist and yelled, "I'm the police chief's son. You lay a hand on me and you're fired. You hear me? Fired." Meanwhile, witnesses shouted, "He was speeding. He almost hit 3 people. He's drunk." Paramedics worked on Marilyn Cole's arm and shoulder. She was conscious but in pain. A senior officer finally stepped in. "Ethan, you're under arrest for driving under the influence and endangering." Ethan didn't let him finish. He swung. A full punch. Right into the officer's jaw. Gasps erupted across the street. Officers forced him to the ground as he screamed and fought. His voice echoed through the night. "My father will bury all of you." And the bodycam caught every second, every word, every threat. By morning, the video had gone viral. And that's how the police chief's son ended up in handcuffs, facing charges that no badge could erase. But the worst hadn't even happened yet. Because the real explosion, the one the entire country would talk about, would take place not on the street, but inside Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. And when Ethan Morrill walked through those courtroom doors, he would make one mistake that even he couldn't escape. The hallway outside Courtroom 4B buzzed with reporters, officers, and citizens who had come just to witness the hearing that had taken over every local news station. Ethan Morrill didn't walk into the courthouse. He marched in, jaw clenched, chest out, eyes burning with entitlement. 2 officers escorted him, but he acted like they were the criminals and he was the celebrity forced to pose for photos. People whispered as he passed, "That's the police chief's son. He punched an officer. He almost killed that teacher. Let's see what Judge Caprio does." Inside, the courtroom was packed. So many people had shown up that security had to turn others away. Everyone wanted to witness the moment the most privileged man in Providence faced the only judge known for being fair, even to the powerful. Judge Frank Caprio entered quietly, his presence instantly calming the room. But not Ethan, not even a little. Caprio sat. The officer announced the case. Cameras clicked softly. "Ethan Morrill," the judge began, "you are charged with reckless endangerment, assaulting an officer, and driving under the influence. How do you plead?" Ethan didn't respond to the question. Instead, he pointed at Judge Caprio and said, "I want a different judge." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Caprio raised an eyebrow. Even he didn't expect that level of arrogance so early. "May I ask why?" Caprio said calmly. Ethan smirked. "Because this is beneath me, sir." An officer behind him stiffened. The prosecutor blinked. Caprio leaned forward, not out of anger but curiosity. "Beneath you?" he repeated softly. Ethan shrugged carelessly. "Look, let's not pretend this is a real court case. My dad will handle it. Let's just get this over with." The room fell silent again. Something in Judge Caprio's face changed. Not anger, not frustration. Disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment. Caprio folded his hands. "Mr. Morrill, do you understand that a woman was injured in this incident?" Ethan rolled his eyes. Yeah, I heard she has a bruised arm. She'll live." A wave of outrage moved across the gallery. Someone whispered, "Monster." Someone else muttered, "If that were anyone else, he'd already be in jail." Judge Caprio kept his voice level. "Sir, she is a retired school teacher. She served this city for 35 years. Ethan scoffed. "And that's her choice. She's not my problem." Caprio blinked slowly. "Mr. Morrill," he asked gently, "do you feel any remorse?" Ethan laughed, actually laughed. "Remorse? You mean for the accident or for hitting the officer who grabbed me? Because both were their fault, not mine." The entire back row gasped. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, may I present the bodycam footage?" Ethan didn't even turn his head. "Show whatever you want. None of this matters." Judge Caprio nodded to the bailiff. The room lights dimmed. The bodycam video began playing on the monitor. Everyone watched the crash, the chaos, the injured teacher, Ethan screaming, Ethan threatening, Ethan punching the officer square in the jaw. And then the line that made the entire courtroom freeze. "My father will bury all of you." The video ended. Silence swallowed the room. Judge Caprio looked at him softly, not with hatred, not with rage, with sadness. "Mr. Morrill," Caprio said quietly, "is that how you believe the law works?" Ethan shrugged again. "That is how it works." Those 5 words broke something in the courtroom. A woman shouted, "Then why are we even here?" A man stood up and said, "This is unbelievable." Reporters scribbled furiously. But Judge Caprio raised one hand and the chaos instantly stopped. He looked Ethan dead in the eyes. "Son, the law doesn't bend for the powerful, it protects the powerless." Ethan smirked. "Maybe in your world, Judge. Not in mine." Caprio's expression tightened, not from anger but resolve. "Mr. Morrill," he said, "you are dangerously mistaken about how justice works." Then the judge did something that shattered the arrogance out of the room. He asked, "Is your father present today?" The doors in the back opened, and in walked Police Chief Daniel Morrill, Ethan's father. Not in uniform, not with swagger, but with a face carved by shame. Ethan's jaw dropped. "Dad, what are you?" His father didn't look at him, not once. He walked straight to the front row, eyes on the floor, and sat down. The courtroom didn't breathe, not a sigh, not a whisper. Because everyone realized this case was no longer about an arrogant boy. It was about a father watching his son destroy everything he believed in. Ethan's smirk faded. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Judge Caprio spoke softly but firmly. "Mr. Morrill, your father will hear every word of what you say today. I hope, for your sake, you choose your next words carefully." The room leaned in. Ethan swallowed, his mouth opened. And the words he was about to say would determine not just his fate but his father's legacy. For a long moment, Ethan didn't speak. His jaw clenched. Eyes flickered from the judge to the crowd to the cameras, then finally to his father. Police Chief Daniel Morrill didn't look like a man in power today. He looked like a man carrying a lifetime of disappointment. His shoulders drooped. His eyes were heavy, red, tired. His uniform, the symbol of everything he stood for, felt like a weight he could no longer bear. And Ethan hated it. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "tell him. Tell him this is all blown out of." His father didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't even lift his head. Judge Caprio watched them silently. Then he said, "Mr. Morrill, you may speak." Ethan straightened proudly, waiting for his father to defend him. But the father didn't speak to the judge. He spoke to his son, and his voice broke. "Ethan," his father whispered, "I have stood beside officers as they risked their lives night after night. I have comforted victims. I have buried friends. I have carried the weight of justice on my shoulders for 30 years. He inhaled shakily. "And never, not once, have I felt the shame I feel today." Ethan blinked, stunned. The courtroom went silent again. The father continued, "You talk about my power, my influence, my name, as if any of it exists to protect your arrogance." His voice cracked. "I spent my whole career fighting corruption, and now my own son behaves like he's above the law." Ethan clenched his fists. "Dad, don't do this." But his father cut him off sharply. "You almost killed a woman, Ethan." The words echoed through the courtroom. "You raised your hand against an officer. You threatened the very people who protect this city. You shamed every badge, including mine." Ethan's face hardened. "Are you seriously choosing them over me?" His father didn't hesitate. "I am choosing justice." Ethan's mouth twitched. A strange mix of anger and panic washed over his face. He looked at Judge Caprio again. "So what? You both want me to grovel, cry, fake remorse?" He shook his head angrily. "I'm not doing that." The room gasped again. Chief Morrill looked devastated. Judge Caprio remained still, his calm presence somehow heavier than anger. He spoke softly, Ethan Morrill, when you entered this courtroom, I hoped, truly hoped, you would find humility, even just an ounce. Ethan scoffed. Humility doesn't work on people like me. That was the moment the courtroom finally understood. Ethan didn't respect the law. He didn't respect his father. He didn't respect anyone. Judge Caprio straightened in his chair. "Bailiff," he said quietly, "please bring forward the victim." A hush fell over the room. Two court officers escorted Marilyn Cole, the retired schoolteacher, into the courtroom. Her arm was in a sling, her movements slow, careful. The audience instinctively stood out of respect, except Ethan. He remained seated, irritated, tapping his foot impatiently. Marilyn reached the podium. Her voice was faint but steady. "Your Honor, I am not here for revenge. I am not here for money. I only want one thing." She turned toward Ethan. To hear him say he understands he hurt someone. Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, lady, your arm is barely scratched." Gasps exploded through the courtroom. One woman muttered, "Heartless." Someone else whispered, "He needs jail, not mercy." Marilyn looked down sadly. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly. "Mr. Morrill," he said gently, "that was your moment to show humanity." Ethan shrugged again. "I don't care about her feelings." "Are we done?" Even his father looked like he had been punched in the chest. Judge Caprio closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was no softness left, no gentleness, no tolerance. Only the stern, unwavering resolve of a man who had dedicated his entire life to justice. "Mr. Morrill," he said, "you have given this court no choice." Ethan smirked again. "Oh, here we go." And that's when Judge Caprio lifted a document from his desk. A single sheet of paper. The courtroom held its breath. The moment had arrived. The moment that would determine whether Ethan Morrill, the police chief's son, would walk out of this courtroom or be carried out in handcuffs. Judge Frank Caprio held the document in his hand with the care of a man carrying a lifetime's worth of principle. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk returning to his face, because in his mind nothing this judge said could change anything. He was the police chief's son. He was untouchable. He owned the room. But he didn't notice the silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the air itself was waiting. Caprio looked at Ethan, then at his father, then at the injured teacher standing humbly at the podium, and finally he spoke. "Mr. Morrill, I had hoped today would show me even the smallest sign of responsibility, humility, or remorse." He set the document down gently. "But instead, you have shown me entitlement, disrespect, and disregard for human life." Ethan's smirk faltered just a little. Caprio turned toward the gallery. "I have served this city for over 4 decades. I have seen hardened criminals show more decency than what this young man has displayed today." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Chief Morrill bowed his head, unable to bear the weight of the truth. The judge continued, "Mr. Morrill, you claim the law bends for people like you." He paused. "It does not." For the first time, the room felt the shift. The power no longer sat with Ethan. It sat with the judge. Caprio's voice grew firm, not loud, not angry, but the kind of firm that shakes a person to their core. "You nearly killed a citizen. You assaulted an officer. And you threatened the very institution your father has sworn his life to protect." Ethan opened his mouth, but Caprio raised a hand, gently shutting him down without a word. "As for your father," he turned to Chief Morrill, "no father should have to carry the shame you carry today." The chief closed his eyes, jaw trembling. Then Caprio looked at Ethan again. "Mr. Morrill, you have shown this court who you are. Now I will show you who we are." He lifted the document again. "The court hereby sentences you to—" The room froze. You could hear a pin drop. Even Ethan leaned forward, heartbeat finally betraying his arrogance. Judge Caprio read, "12 months in a juvenile correctional facility." Gasps exploded. Ethan's face drained of color. "Followed by mandatory rehabilitation, anger management counseling, and 300 hours of community service, specifically working with injured and disabled citizens." Ethan stood up so fast his chair slammed into the wall. "What? No, 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 you can't do that. Dad, say something." Every camera in the room zoomed in. Every reporter scribbled wildly. All eyes turned to the police chief, but Chief Morrill didn't stand. He didn't defend his son. He didn't raise a single objection. Instead, he whispered the words that would haunt Ethan forever. "Justice is justice, son." Ethan staggered backwards. "Dad, please," but his father didn't move. He stared straight ahead, tears filling his eyes but never falling. Judge Caprio continued calmly, "You will begin your sentence immediately." Ethan shook his head wildly. "No, no, no, Judge, please, please, you don't understand." "You can't put me in with," Caprio interjected softly. "I understand perfectly. You believe consequences are for other people. Today, you learn they are for you as well." The bailiffs approached. "Don't touch me," Ethan screamed, backing into the podium. But they reached for his wrists anyway. The metal clicked. Handcuffs wrapped around the wrists of the most powerful man's son. The courtroom erupted not in chaos but in stunned, breathless shock. Judge Caprio then addressed the courtroom. "Let this be a message," he said, his voice echoing. "No one, no matter their name, wealth, status, or lineage, stands above the law." Even the audience stood up, some in tears, some in disbelief, some in gratitude. Reporters whispered, "He actually did it. Caprio just sent the police chief's son to jail. This will be the headline for years." As Ethan was dragged toward the door, he made one last desperate plea. "Dad, Dad, don't let them do this." But the police chief didn't move, not an inch. He simply whispered, "I raised you to be better, but the world must make you better now." The doors slammed shut behind Ethan, and with that sound the entire courtroom exhaled. Justice had spoken, and this time it was louder than privilege. The courtroom felt colder than before, as if someone had quietly lowered the temperature the moment Judge Caprio ordered the officers to secure the police chief's son. But now, something shifted again. For the first time since the hearing began, the young man's facade cracked. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't acting invincible. He was silent. And silence from a man who lived on arrogance was more shocking than his earlier outburst. A terrifying realization hits him as the officers stood behind him, ready to escort him out. The judge continued speaking. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the calm authority only decades of wisdom could give. "Son," Judge Caprio said softly, "you think you're untouchable because of your father's rank, but right now, the only thing protecting you is the patience of this court, and that patience is running out." The young man swallowed hard. His fingers twitched. His swagger evaporated like smoke. For the first time, he felt something he wasn't used to feeling: accountability. The audience leaned in, sensing the shift. Even his own attorney, who had been sweating for the past 20 minutes, finally found the courage to speak. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "my client may have acted emotionally." Judge Caprio cut him off with just a raise of his hand. "No, he acted entitled," the judge said, "and there is a difference." The courtroom murmured again. "The father arrives," and all hell breaks loose just as the judge prepared to deliver the next phase of consequences. The back doors swung open. The police chief himself walked in, decorated, respected. The man who had served the city for 30 years. But right now, his face wasn't the face of a powerful officer. It was the face of a father fighting between embarrassment and fury. He quietly approached the front row, nodding respectfully to the court, then locking eyes with his son. And the tension was so heavy you could feel it pressing down on everyone. "Dad," the young man began, but his father didn't let him finish. "You assaulted a judge," the chief whispered sharply. "You put your hands on a man who has given his life to serving this community." The young man froze. He had fought back against authority all day, but this was different. This was his father, a father who had carried the city on his shoulders and now had to carry the shame his son created. Judge Caprio interjected, "Chief, I understand how difficult this is, but the court must proceed." The chief nodded. "Your Honor, I'm not here to defend him. I'm here to witness what justice looks like." The room fell utterly silent. The judge delivers a message that will live forever. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Son," he began, looking straight at the police chief's child, Your father has worked his entire life protecting others. He earned his respect through sacrifice. But what have you earned? The young man didn't dare look up. You tried to use his badge as your shield, the judge continued. But today, that badge won't save you. Every camera in the courtroom turned toward the bench. Every spectator's breath held in suspense. Judge Caprio wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. And that disappointment hit harder than any punishment. The sentence everyone was waiting for: "You assaulted a sitting judge," Caprio said. "There must be consequences." The chief nodded silently. The son clenched his jaw, bracing himself. Judge Caprio continued, "I will order the following: 30 days in custody with credit for no previous offenses. A mandatory behavior rehabilitation program focused on anger management. And finally," he paused. The room leaned forward. "You will spend 100 hours serving at the veterans' home, assisting men and women who actually know what discipline and respect look like." A murmur spread through the audience: shock, approval, even relief. The chief bowed his head, deeply moved. The young man blinked, his arrogance completely burned away. For once in his privileged life, he didn't argue, because somewhere inside him, a small voice finally whispered, "You needed this."